So now, first of all, thank you to my colleagues for such nice presentations about the different elements of the project. Hopefully this has clear the vision we had for the whole project. Of course, during the actual work, sometimes new challenges will come up and we will need to approach them. Of course, we don't know everything in advance. So for now, I think it's time for the Q&A session. I hope you have some questions. Please, I will ask you to raise your hands or to do something equivalent in Zoom so that we can have some order. So does anyone want to break the ice and do the first question? If you don't, I will start.
I can start.
Oh, thank you, Edwin. Please do.
Thank you. Edwin Sea from Center for Corporate Responsibility and Sustainability at the University of Zurich in Switzerland. A very interesting presentation. My question is a bit general and thinking a bit on the application of these tools and concepts, because on the one hand, it's very clear that this thing is designed for architects, engineers, but there is a very strong component on that is related to the industry and the availability of the materials that one could propose in such design. So how do you envision that further step on connecting to the industries providing the materials with the, let's say, high level of circularity indicators? Or
yes, maybe we can take a few questions and then we'll just move it on to our team to try to address them. Do you have any more questions, Edwin?
Can I ask one question?
Vanessa, hola.
Hello.
Please do.
I couldn't understand how will you measure it? It's a circularity index or score? Will be more traditional indicators? And if you are going to use more traditional indicators, how will you allocate impacts to recycled or materials to be recycled or already recycled? And it's a personal question because my work focus on it. So thank you for your
You'll have to help
answer.
us addressing this question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Could we take a few more questions, please?
Okay, may I please? Helge in Trondheim. Thank you very much for very inspiring presentations. I'm sure this will be a very interesting and highly relevant project, and also challenging. My question is with respect to the methodology that we are aiming for. Of course, is a tool in order to provide input to the planning and design. However, at what stages in planning? You briefly mentioned that in some cases there may be difficulties in getting access to data because you don't really know the design. So are we in a very early stage of the planning process, the conceptual planning process, or where are we? And that means also, of course, that will influence a lot the access to data and what kind of LCI data and so on to make use of in the estimation of indicator values. Thanks.
Thank you, Alvin. So maybe we can take these three, and if we have further more questions, we will again we'll address them afterwards. So so maybe I will start. So to my colleagues, do you want to address any of these questions, or should I volunteer any one of you? So maybe Verena, could you maybe answer Vanessa's question about how to? Yes, please.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Vanessa, for the question. This is work in progress. So our idea is to, I think it should be a two-step process. So I think we will spend quite a lot of work on making a practical guideline for the design for disassembly criteria. So as I mentioned, there's 4 different criteria that I used. So we will look at different building elements. I think an easy example is always to start with a window, for example, to see like how it is built into the wall and how you can remove it, and then if you can disassemble it further down and so on. And then scale it up or do the same thing for other building elements. Of course, a more traditional type of construction like a wall or a ceiling would be nice to have, since this is not the most typical example you can find in these guidelines for circularity. And then in the end, I think it will still, to be honest, a qualitative evaluation. So it will depend on what type of connection do we have. Is it a physical connection? Is it a chemical connection? What type of chemical connection it is? And then we will assign, with the help of experts, values to these types of connections for the different elements and for the different criteria. And that will then help us in the next step, in the second step, to calculate a circularity indicator. Here we will use an existing methodology, the one that I mentioned by the Drive Zero project. It's quite interesting. I recommend everybody to check it out. That kind of like, they sum it up and they weigh it, and they also look at like where the element is located in the building. They use this S-layer model by Brandt. Maybe you've heard about it. So is the element located in the skin or in the structure? And depending on where it is, there is a different level of importance. And then we will be able to calculate this circularity indicator. However, I think the more important part will be on the design for disassembly, because the circularity indicator is more, yeah, it's an indicator. It sums up a lot of different aspects in one number that then, without looking further into detail, don't tell you so much of what it actually means. So I think it will be important to accurately describe and robustly describe how you can access the material at the end of life to recover it, and then what's the quality of the material. Can you reuse it or do you have to recycle it? Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Verena.
Thank you.
So thank you, Verena, for the response. So I will just maybe to Elga's, I will start by Edwin's. Maybe I can provide some insight. So your question was basically, if I understood correctly, how do we approach industry to give the information that is needed, because they are not that willing usually to provide the necessary information to start building this database. So that's basically our first, I would say, our first issue when we started discussing this database was exactly how should we get the amount of data, large amounts of data that we need to start parameterizing and building the database. So that's why we basically started looking at different databases, like Verena mentioned, and using this as a stepping stone, let's say, to populate the database, and then get more information, which will naturally also require some contribution from the industry, of course. But we want to start building this from existing information so that we don't start from scratch. Of course, we have already approached several developers, like the ones that are like Vic and even the Atelier dos Remédios. They are an architect office. But we also have contacts with the construction sector that are interested in providing this information for specific building systems that they have and specific construction elements they have, and provide us the information to build this database. Because of course they also want to start getting some information that they can use, especially to publicize their buildings or their construction elements, the environmental benefits of their construction approaches, elements. So that's basically our approach. We are not aiming to have a very large database, because we understand that we should have a good database with clear guidelines, with good demonstration elements, and build a bit on the existing data sets that are out there and are already recognized as standards for the industry. I don't know if that's answered.
Somehow, but just maybe not to stretch the question, but just to make the comment based on my experience working on this field. what you do is of course very important to have all this information because you need to build the BIM models, LCA models. There's a lot of data, but at the end of the day, when we have a tool working, then we say and put an example: clay-based bricks have very high circularity indicator, and say, okay, yeah, I will use this brick, but then where can I get it? You know, how much? And when we start thinking on circularity, then we think on reusing materials from demolitions, for instance, and then where are the windows? How many windows I have? So, and those are very, I think, important questions to start addressing from now on that you are starting, because otherwise you will do all this very heavy work, and at the end, you come to the reality, and yes, we can calculate all these things, we can create these great models, but how we're going to build them? So it's important to have this connection from my humble perspective to the industry, and see within this assessment of circularity some sort of material flow analysis or availability of material, because many of them, like for instance, timber, you have high level of circularity, but how much recycled timber do we get in Europe? Like zero. Everything is used for energy gain afterwards. So all these details that go more into the application and the use of the tool, I think I would recommend you to start from now on, at least considering them on how to connect this virtual thing with the reality.
Thank you, Edwin. I think it's a very useful insight, and we will surely use that information to we will start getting our heads around that input that you gave us. It's very useful, I think. So just coming to Elga's also comment on the basically what are we aiming for at which stage are we looking for? And I think that of course these two are more easy to apply or to even think about in the design stage. That's for sure, because we are building from the ground up. We have all the time, or well, we have the detail we need to start building these BIM models, etc. But I think there's some potential for backwards, lack of better term, for backwards compatibility for building. So we see like Rui, that is in the BIM, that builds these BIM models. He has been working with, for instance, if I can say, with with Sonai Sierra, for instance, that manages shopping centers, and they have the building built already, and they are now using services like Ruiz to build the BIM model. And so there's a lot of information that goes into the BIM model. And so there's like a new layer that can be offered, just looking at the type of materials that goes into the building, then looking at the circularity of these elements, and maybe not the whole building, but the most relevant materials, those that have to be recovered at some point, which have a smaller lifespan, that need to be replaced every 10 years, for instance. Then we can start focusing on this this type of user, which is building manager. They need to have this kind of information, and starting from the BIM model that can be built not from the ground zero, not when the building is being designed, but also when it's being managed. Rui, do you want to add something, maybe?
Perhaps when in the presentation, when I were talking about functionalities like the digital twin platform should be interactive, real-time, 3D and 2D, we are talking about a stage, not just the design stage, but the operation and maintenance stage. Sure, like we all of us have stated earlier, we in the design stage, with these tools, we define what we create a potential of reuse of the materials, but in the operation and maintenance stage, it's the users and the facilities managers need a tool that help those guys to better understand what to do with their material assets when they reach the end of life of them. Yes, we use lots of methodologies to create these digital twins, these 3D models with all the information. We use the laser scanning, like you said, we use the laser scanning in the shopping mall of Sonai Sierra, in all the building, but in special the technical areas with lots of pipes and equipments, and all of those materials, all of those systems that have the need for maintenance and have in periodic maintenance and have to be substituted for new ones. Those materials like iron, copper, etc. Are very have a great potential of recycling, recovering. I don't know. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Rui. So I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions still. We want to keep we know a lot of people have to leave at 9:30 or 11:30 if you're in Central Europe. So could you have 2 questions?
I can have, thank you. This is Rolf van Rebone from NTNU in Norway. Very interesting talks, and I have several questions. First of all, how can we introduce this in the early design phase, also kind of introduce the BIM in a low level of detail? That's one problem that we are working a lot with. Another one is kind of, I like this idea of scanning and scan to BIM and of existing, but how can we then classify what we are scanning for reuse or recycling? Because it's not everything we want to recycle or reuse because it's not fulfilling the technical requirements. For instance, in Norway, we have old windows is not useful. It's not good enough in terms of, or we are not allowed to use them actually. So kind of how do we deal with this? And but again, thank you. Very interesting, and I'm looking very much forward for this.
Sure. Maybe Antonio Guerra, do you want to introduce this first question of Rolf's first question, introducing this at a low level of detail?
Well, thank you for the question. What I might say about that is that we are trying to have two levels of approach to the problem. A streamlined approach in which we use generic information about the elements, the products, and so on. So the model doesn't need a great level of development. And we are also considering a more complete analysis in which we have more information about the project. And so we can use more detail of the products regarding, of course, LCA, circularity, and so on. So we are dividing the approach into different directions, a streamlined approach more with more generic information for preliminary stages of the project, and a more complete approach in which we use more detailed information for the phases of the project in which we have more detail about final solutions.
Okay, I think for the second question, there's no good answer. It's something that we have also been discussing. And I think at this level, there's a need to do this kind of very labor-intensive assessment. So when you are building the BIM model with laser scanning, just like we described a few minutes ago, I think there's the opportunity for environmental engineers or engineers with this concept of circularity, reuse potential, recycling, etc., to go into this manual, I would, lack of better word, but a manual assessment of the building elements. I said environmental engineer because I'm an environmental engineer. I'm sorry for the architects and civil engineers in the room, but of course, all of us that have this environmental expertise can go and look and assess the actual potential of, for instance, reusing old windows. So if there's no real potential, you should classify these objects in the BIM model as low potential. And so I don't think this is going to be at this level, at least now. There's a lot of automated ways to do this. What we want to do is to include in this database, we want to include, so when you are building the BIM model, you can include this kind of information of the current, the maintenance or the lifespan of these elements. And so you can at least project for the next 10 or 15 years what's going to be replaced, or what's the current state of windows or doors or any construction element. And so to do the assessment, I think it's difficult to think about anything else than doing actual manual work. And just in the build model, you should include this data to have like a forecast of the replacement needs for the building. And I think we have a question from Stephanie in the chat. I think this will close for today. And naturally, if you have further questions, please send us an email. You can find our contacts in LinkedIn or in our research web pages, etc. So coming to Stephanie's question, how does the plugin know which EPD and other reference data needs to be connected to each material? So there's no, we also discussed, we are currently discussing this in the consortium. So maybe José Silvestre, I don't know if he's available. He's, I think, the better person to respond to this, but I think we don't have an automated way to import this data from the EPD to the plugin. So it's going to be a bit manual. So we need to look at the existing EPDs imported to the database manually. And then the plugin will be able to use this data. And it seems like a more cumbersome process. But in fact, in the future, there's some potential to use some kind of automated databases of EPDs that José Silvestre knows about a lot better than we do. But there's some potential to do this a bit more streamlined, less cumbersome way. But at this point, for this project, we are not reinventing that part of the process. I don't know if any of my colleagues wants to add something about this.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie, for the question. Antonio already answered that question in the right direction. So we will feed the database with information from EPDs, European EPDs, as much as possible, Portuguese ones, but for other materials from other European databases of EPDs, and where for materials for which we don't find information on EPDs, we need to use generic databases. But in fact, we need to associate each data set to a specific material. So it will be the user that needs to make that connection, and it will not be automatic, as Antonio said. But the advantage is that an architect or engineer can develop his own database and from project to project, that association will not need, does not need to be made again and repeated, because the BIM objects start having those connections, and it will be easier from project to project and at the office level to benefit from previous projects, and to have the BIM objects already upgraded and integrating that layer regarding the environmental and also the economic impacts.
Thank you, Zé. So if we don't have any further questions, I think we're just 7 minutes late. So we did it in 1 hour. Kudos for us. I hope you enjoyed this session. I hope it was informative. Hopefully we can continue talking with you guys and everyone else that wants to join us in this process, in this project. So we want to build this community around the project and hopefully get insight and benefit for the benefit of the project. If you have any further questions, we will send the presentation to all the people that were registered through Eventbrite. But if you don't get it by any reason, if you don't get the presentation, please send us an email or try to contact us. We will send it as soon as possible. Okay. Thank you so much. Hope to hear from you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, and bye-bye to everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.